Hello, my friends. Welcome to Lindy's Magpie Reads. This is a place where I talk about books. I have finished 7 fabulous titles recently, so I'm going to get right to talking about them. Starting with What Comes Echoing Back by Leah McKay. McKay is a Canadian author from Nova Scotia. That's where this novel is set. It is about a couple of teenagers in high school, and both of them have had traumatic experiences, having their images be on social media without their consent, and so they're kind of outcasts at school. They become friends. Music is part of their healing, and it's so heartwarming. So even though bad things have happened to them, there's a lot of hope for the future, that they're going to be okay. The violence that's in here, there's 2 different kinds. The sexual violence happens off the page. The physical brutality, it's not a surprise to learn that for one of the teens, he accidentally killed another student. Well, you don't even need to know how it happened, but just that he accidentally killed somebody, and at the start of the novel, he has just spent his time in a juvenile detention center, and he's coming back to school. I actually read this for my YA book club, and it's what I'd call a crossover novel. The publisher is presenting it as an adult book. I can agree with that. Doesn't quite feel like YA, even though the 2 central characters are teens, but there are other characters who are adults who have small but significant parts in the book, and I also think it will appeal to teen readers in high school. Definitely the whole issue of social media and how it can be abused is relevant to all of us. Next up is another Canadian novel, Daughter by Claudia Dey. This came out last year, and I have to say the description of it did not appeal. I was mistaken. What I got from the description was that it was going to be mostly about a sordid affair that this man who was a famous author had, and he shared secrets with his daughter as kind of that she was kind of a confidant. And there's a little bit of that in there, but the reason that I picked it up is because Teresa Lavasser, who has a column on the podcast, The Next Chapter, I will link that down below. She was talking about 3 fabulous audiobooks that she recommends, and this is one of them. Now, she mentioned that there's a full cast, 9 narrators who perform the audiobook, and that immediately caught my interest. And she also talked about how the narrative, the story itself, is so propulsive. I 100% agree. It is a character-based novel, but also there's a lot going on. It is about the relationships between the family members in a mixed family. A father who had 2 daughters marries a woman who had already had 2 sons, and they have a daughter together. So there's step siblings, and there's relationships with the original wife, and yes, this man is also having affairs, so that is going on. There's email communication, there's the issue of, is your family there to support you when you go through tough times? The central character is the daughter Mona, who was one of the original two daughters, and she's a playwright. And there's some competition between her and her father having to do with writing. He's very protective of his status, but she comes to realize that her father is maybe not such a good writer after all. There are reasons why he was famous. Here's just a little short example that I transcribed from the audiobook. The father's name is Paul, and in this bit he's speaking to his daughter Mona. Paul was speaking to me, but in the echo chamber of his car he was also speaking to himself, to a novel in progress. He was practicing feeling. There's a scene where Mona is telling him about just how sad and wretched she feels. And he puts on his tape recorder and records that so that he can use it in the future. Yeah, that's the kind of guy that he is. And Mona just wants to be loved by her father. I felt all the emotions in this book, and I loved it. Now, daughter is actually on the long list for the Carol Shields Prize, and the short list is going to be announced on Tuesday, April the 9th. So far, I think I've read maybe 7 or 8 titles on the list, and I don't have strong feelings about any of them winning, although still I would like to see Eleanor Catton's Burnham Wood come out on top. That would be kind of nice. Next up is a book that is on another prize list, the International Booker Prize, Lost on Me by Veronica Raimo, and it's translated from Italian by Leah Janeczko. This is very much character-based. It doesn't have a lot of plot. It was actually based on a series of monologues that Raimo intended to perform on stage and got made into this novel instead. It is, I think, pretty closely based on the author's life growing up in Rome with a unusual family, and even the central character is Veronica. It's in first person, and for me, the appeal of it is all about the voice. I am going to read from the opening page, so you know what I mean about the voice. And as it happens, I started reading this on Easter Monday. My brother dies several times a month. It's always my mother who phones to inform me of his passing. "Your brother's not answering my calls," she says in a whisper. To her, the telephone bears witness to our permanence on Earth. So, if there's no answer, the only possible explanation is the cessation of all vital functions. When she calls to tell me my brother is gone, she's not looking for reassurance. Instead, she wants me to share in her grief. Suffering together is her form of happiness. Misery shared is misery relished. Sometimes the cause of death is banal: a gas leak, a head-on collision, a broken neck from a bad fall. Other times the scenario is more complex. My mother's call last Easter Monday was followed by another one from a young carabinieri officer. "Your mother has reported your brother's disappearance. Can you confirm this?" They hadn't heard from each other for maybe a couple of hours. He was out to lunch with his girlfriend, and she was agonizing over why he wasn't out to lunch with the person who'd brought him into this world. Yes. So that dark, snarky kind of sense of humor, a mother who is over the top, a father who is a germaphobe and is always building walls inside their apartment so the rooms get progressively smaller and smaller. Yeah, weird things like that. And she's a writer. Her brother, the one that the mother worries about all the time, is also a writer. So there's that competition between the two. Well, at least from Veronica's viewpoint anyway. We don't really know if the brother feels that. And there are some other serendipitous correlations between Lost on Me and the book I was just telling you about, Daughter by Claudia Dey, like the strange relationships with the parents and the way that family stories shape our individual identity. This is the only book off of the International Booker list that I have read, and I quite enjoyed it. Don't really think that it might be chosen as a winner, but I don't really have a good sense, only that it's not the type of novel that would normally be picked by a jury. The shortlist is going to be announced on Tuesday, April the 9th. So next is this work of nonfiction, Why We Remember, Unlocking Memory's Power to Hold On to What Matters, and it's by Charan, Ranganath. His family immigrated from India to the US when he was a child, and he is a professor of psychology and neuroscience in California. I made so many notes about this book. I am fascinated by the brain and lots of things to do with memory, not just because I've had 3 concussions, but for other reasons. I'm a curious person, and curiosity is one of the things that is talked about in here. I think I will mostly focus on that. I'm going to share some information that leads up to this element of curiosity and memory. For many years, it was generally assumed within the scientific community that dopamine was responsible for the experience of enjoying a reward, and it's frequently referred to in the media as the pleasure chemical. But the data tells a different story. Dopamine is about motivating us to seek out rewards. Later, he says that Pavlov's most interesting contribution to the science of memory was to characterize our responses to novel and surprising experiences. He noticed that the animals in his experiments had a characteristic response to any changes or new things in the environment, and he called this response the "what is it" reflex. Now, this reflex came to be known as the orienting response, and it's an orchestrated set of changes in the brain and actually all over the body in response to something new or surprising. Our pupils enlarge, increasing sensitivity to light. Blood is pumped to the brain and constricted in the rest of the body, and the brain gets a brief shot of neuromodulators such as dopamine, noradrenaline, and acetylcholine. There's also a coordinated change in neural activity throughout a network of brain areas, including the hippocampus and the prefrontal cortex. Now, all of this about our response to things that are new and surprising reminded me about myself as a reader, and how what I'm looking for in fiction is novelty. I want to be surprised. I like the kind of prose that leaves me with a lot of space for wondering and I like ambiguous endings. So all of that makes sense in the kind of brain that I have that is particularly rewarded by surprise and curiosity. Now, let's get back to curiosity. One of the things that has been proposed and is pretty much held true is that curiosity is about the motivation to seek information rather than the satisfaction of getting our questions answered. Being in a curious state of mind helps us to learn, and people who have a personality trait that's called open to experience tend to be the people who learn the most being in a state of curiosity. So all of this stuff I just found so fascinating for its relevance to me as a person, as a reader, and as somebody who loves to learn. There's just so much more in this book on memory. I can't do it justice in just this short amount of time talking about it, so I will just recommend that if you are interested in memory and why we forget and the kinds of practical things that we can do to remember the important things, then pick this up. And now there's a lawnmower. I'm going to have to finish this later. Okay, lawn mowing is done. It has started raining a bit. Hopefully there won't be too much. I'm under an umbrella. I want to tell you about this fabulous picture book, Eric, by Shaun Tan. And I'm especially bringing up picture books on my channel this month because April is the month of a fabulous readathon called Picture This. It's the third year in a row that Jack from Spread Book Joy and Shelley Swearingen have been hosting this readathon to get adults to read picture books for pleasure. This one is such a delight. It was originally published in a longer book by Shaun Tan called Tales from Outer Suburbia, and it definitely deserves its own picture book. It's about an exchange student and his family in Australia can't pronounce his name, so he says, just call me Eric. The artwork is done in graphite pencil and colored pencil. And the story is so very charming and just wonderful. Interestingly, there is a scene where Eric is at the movies with popcorn in front of him, and you can see how diminutive he is compared to the popcorn. And in the book that I talked about in my last video, the picture book Dandelion's Dream by Yoko Tanaka, a similar situation occurs with the dandelion who's dreaming of being a lion. You could also use it for Aussie April, if that is still a thing. 5 years ago, Doris from Aldi Books and Jacqueline, who is a Australian living in Texas, had started this readathon to read Australian authors, and people still talk about Aussie April, but as far as I know, there isn't a booktuber who is hosting it as an event. So if I'm wrong, please correct me in the comments down below. Another readathon, and I know this is happening, is Trans Girl April. And I believe it's the third year for that. It's hosted by Kevi over at Say Kevi. I will include a link to Kevi's announcement down below. It's to encourage us to read books by trans authors. And one of the books that I've picked up is a collection of autobiographical comics by trans creators. It's called The Outside. Trans and non-binary comics edited by the Cow, Min Chistensen, and David Daneman. And I found this on my library's Hoopla collection. If your library has Hoopla, you can find it there. It is also available in print format. So this works for Trans Girl April, but also People April. Roz of Scallydandling About the Books and Elizabeth of Bouquins and Books are hosting People April for the second year in a row, and this is a readathon to encourage us to read nonfiction about people. And this collection, this anthology, is autobiographical. All of these creators are talking about their coming to acceptance as who they are, as trans or non-binary. And a distinctive aspect of the collection is that these stories are very positive. Most of them end with the sense of strength in knowing oneself. Each contribution is usually only a couple of pages long. Some are as short as 1 page. A few are a bit longer than that. The one contributor that I recognized from other books is Dana Simpson, who created the Phoebe and Her Unicorn comics. I really liked the way that these creators describe themselves. And Snail Lords says, "2 souls accidentally got placed into my body. I'm bigender. Took a century for me to accept myself as I am, but I am so much happier now that I've signed a peace treaty with myself." And the mug that he is drinking from there says, "World's okayest creator." I highly recommend this collection. Last up is my favorite book of the bunch. Well, it was hard to pick. I've got several 5-star reads in these books that I've been telling you about. But my absolute favorite is this poetry collection, Bright Fear by Mary Jean Chan. This is her second collection. I also loved her first book, Flesh. This one was on Roz of Scallydandling About the Books. Best books of 2023. I will include a link to her video about that down below. It's not yet published in North America, but I ordered this from Blackwell's in the UK. So glad that I did. She's a lesbian who grew up in Hong Kong and as a teen moved to the UK, where she currently lives and teaches. Her poems are about how words and languages, I'm using plural because she grew up speaking Cantonese and her mother was Shanghainese, and she went to a British English-speaking school in Hong Kong, and French is also an important language for her. Anyway, the power of words and poetry to give her a sense of self really comes through in this. It helps her to deal with things like racism when she landed in the UK, and also being a lesbian. So I just want to share some of my favorite little bits from this to give you flavor. In the poem Answer, at the Poetry Cafe, someone sipping tea once stared at me from across the room and asked, "Are you a man or a woman? I want to know." I got up, moved my laptop, book, and coffee. I eventually replied, "I would prefer not to answer that. Excuse me." This one takes us back to her childhood. In the beginning was the Word. For 12 years, I was told that English was the lingua franca, Imagine being taught to revere a language from the age of 6 when children are most willing to please. Prior to 1997, French was an elective of equal standing to Cantonese. A rumor went around that prefects used to patrol the grounds, fining students if they ever spoke to one another in their mother tongue. English at all times, the teachers trilled. Later, I fell in love with English of my own accord. Or did I? Love, when socially accepted, becomes habit. I took home the English Literature Prize, would let no one else come close. It became a badge of honor, a symbol of my uniqueness, though I was lonelier than I had ever been. At times, English feels like the best kind of evening light. On other days, English becomes something harder, like a white shield. In a poem simply titled by the Roman numeral 13, she says, "As a child, I often considered the impact that falling in love with English had on my mother's happiness. She once said, 'Don't think you can talk back to me in a colonial language. It isn't superior.' I can't describe her voice. When she speaks in Shanghainese, it is sweet like water. Her language came to me as in a familiar dream, a lotus flower sinking into myself and blooming. During my first month in England, I learnt the art and science of speaking to reassure. How else can I survive? It's so easy to be ashamed. I am asked why my poems are so clear. I'll confess, it's what happens when you want to be understood." And her poems are very clear and accessible. Here's just one line that reminds me about what I was just talking about in regards to the book Why We Remember. "I value frank uncertainty over firm knowledge." Me too, Mary Jean. Me too. Love this so much. And that is all I've got for you today. I know that was a lot. If you want more in the sense of flowers, I put together a little video for you. So stick around. I'm going to put that at the end. Yesterday, I went walking in the gardens at Government House. They have formal gardens. They also have natural areas. And spring is blooming all over the place. So hang in there and enjoy. And I just want to thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being there, listening to what I have to say about books. I so much appreciate hearing from you, so please do say hello down in the comments. Let me know what you're thinking about and what you're reading, if you're planning to read any of these, or if you have the books that I've read, if you're going to be or have been participating in People April and Picture This and Trans Girl April, and tell me if Aussie April is still a thing. All of that. Bye for now. We'll see you soon.